Hi friends, hope you're doing well. My name is Saajid. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is coming to you from my car because I literally don't have time to do anything home anymore. So I am trying to film this video as quick as possible. I have an hour before I have to head into school/work. I wanted to do my January wrap up for y'all. In January, I read a total of, how many books did I read? I think I read 7. Yeah, 7. Hopefully I remember all of them in this video. I will be talking about them in order of my least favorite to favorite. I have one 1-star book. I think it was 3 3-star books, 2 4-star books, and then 1 5-star book. Starting off with my 1-star read, I think this calls for a little explanation. So basically what happened was I was scrolling on Kindle looking for romance books, like erotica and stuff, because I wanted to try out that genre, and I was looking for queer stuff. So I found this book for 99 cents, and I figured this sounds ridiculous, but maybe it might be good. Perhaps the sheer ridiculousness of it might be enjoyable. So I was like, let me pick it up, let me give it a read and see if I like it. And ooh, holy mother effing shit. So the book is called Rocking Randy by Bona King. This is an MPreg OMEGAVERSE shifter romance. Now mind you, when I picked this book up, I did not know what any of those things meant. I just completely ignored them. I was like, oh, probably just romance terminology or something. So I'm like, okay, it's whatever. So I started reading it, and right away the writing is just awful. The characters are so two-dimensional, just terribly written. Awful, objectively awful writing. So I'm reading, and then it gets to the part where he gets interested in the love interest, right? So it's about Randy, and he goes to this club or something, and he's infatuated with this band, particularly the lead singer Orion. He starts flirting with him and whatnot, and then he says that his ass got wet. He got so turned on that his ass literally started to salivate. And throughout the book he kept saying that his ass kept getting wet, and I'm like, is that diarrhea? And then at some point in the book the love interest turns into a werewolf, and I'm like, oh, okay. I thought the alpha wolf thing was just referring to the dominant hierarchies and whatnot. So I thought that was what was going on. So I was like, okay, cool, whatever. It's a shifter. That's what a shifter romance means apparently. So I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. It's going on. And then I discovered what MPreg meant. And I was like, oh, okay. Apparently this is a genre of erotica fanfiction that people write. It's very popular on Wattpad. I read this on Kindle, so I didn't know what I was getting into. But it's a very, very popular genre and a very popular fetish. I personally don't judge anybody with that fetish. It's not my place to judge anybody. Just my thing is, I do find it a little bit problematic, and I have seen people talk about how problematic it is, especially in terms of, it's about cisgender men getting pregnant, and it's a fetish for that. But then trans men could also get pregnant, so there's a lot of conversations in the community surrounding the potential transphobia of it all. I don't know too much about the conversation, so I don't think I'm qualified to have much of an opinion on that, but I just thought I would let you all know. And in addition to that and the awful writing, there were some scenes where it just kind of borderlined on consent, and I was not really comfortable with that. I understand that some people do find it hot, the whole notion of saying no, but the person keeps going. If you're turned on by that, to each their own. Different strokes for different folks, literally. But for me personally, I found that to be a little bit uncomfortable. So this book was bad. I give people gonna be in the back of my video. Shit. This book was bad. I give it 1 star. I don't recommend it. Moving on to my 3-star reads. I think the first one I could probably share with you all is Mad, Bad and Dangerous to Know by Samira Ahmed. This is a book that I really liked, but I was also very disappointed by. I feel like for me to really air out my thoughts, I'm going to have to do a full-on review for this, which I have to do because this is actually an ARC. The book doesn't come out till April, but I got an ARC from Soho Teen in exchange for an honest review. I requested it because I've enjoyed Samira Ahmed's works in the past, and the plot itself sounded so good, and it was really good. When I picked the book up, I really enjoyed the mystery, I really enjoyed the plot itself, I really enjoyed the historical intrigue. This is a story about a girl named Kayam who goes to Paris and she's doing research on a painting, and she's particularly interested in a woman in this painting. And we're also getting the perspective of the woman. So in between each of Kayam's chapters, we're getting this very these short chapters that are around 2 pages long from the perspective of a woman named Layla. And Layla is the woman in the painting, and she's from 1800s Turkey or something. So it's a really, really intriguing mystery, and it has a really, really cool historical intrigue and a great message about writing women's stories. So I really, really enjoyed all of that. I think it's an excellent book in terms of the mystery and the concept itself and the messages that the story is trying to convey to the reader. However, romance was awful. The romance was so incredibly bad and so cringy. It was like a love triangle that they had going on, and I was not here for it. I really was turned off by it. So I'm probably going to have to do a separate video talking about that. I don't want you to not pre-order the book if it's something that you're planning to read or that you're excited for. Don't let my review get your excitement down. I would recommend waiting for my review if you want to know more about the romance and stuff, but if you're still willing to read it, it's an okay book, and I would say go ahead and pre-order it if you're still planning on doing so. The next 3-star read I read was a really weird one. It's called Jessica the Wizard Eats a Third Horse. I read this based on a recommendation from my friend Kayum, who really likes this book, and I could definitely see why, because it's actually really good. It's a fantasy, first of all, and it's about this wizard named Jessica, as the title suggests, and she has had a past of consuming horses for reasons you'll understand when you read the book. What happens is she is ashamed of this horse eating past. I just can't say that seriously. So she decides to move to a new city called Bloodfist, and while she's there, she's working with this new company, and money starts to go missing from the company, and she ends up having to solve the mystery of what's really going on. And somehow she just gets the feeling that it's going to culminate in her eating a third horse, which it does, as the title suggests, but you have to read it to understand exactly how that happened. It's a weird book. It's a nonsense fantasy, first of all, so it's written purposefully in a nonsensical style, which I think was a good choice on the part of the author, because not only I think that's just his style, I think that it works well with the kind of story that he was trying to tell. The story itself doesn't really make a lot of sense, and it's the kind of story that will leave you with a lot of questions. However, the fact that it's written in a nonsense style allows you as a reader to just kind of suspend your disbelief and enjoy the story for what it is, and I liked that about it. I thought it was well written. The characters were really cool. It was queer, which was another really cool thing to encounter in the story. It's not great. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a new fave or that I would recommend it to everybody, but if it sounds intriguing enough and you'd like to give it a read it, I guess. Next up, I read The Gentleman's Guide to Getting Lucky by Mackenzie Lee. This is a novella in the Montague siblings trilogy that takes place between the events of the first book and the second book. And I personally like to think of this as kind of like an epilogue to the first book, The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. If you don't know what that book is about, it's basically about this boy called Monty who goes on this incredible European tour in the 1700s with his sister Felicity and his best friend Percy. Percy is also his love interest, so it's kind of like a queer romance set in the 1700s, but it's also this really fun road trip story. And this novella is just about 100 pages long, and it follows their experiences after the events of the first book. Particularly, it follows Percy and Monty's first attempt at having sex, and it is really cute. I enjoyed it. I liked what the book had to say about sex. It was very sex positive. It talked about the importance of communication, of being vulnerable, of knowing your partner, and all of that kind of stuff. And to see that in the context of a 1700s European historical fiction was also really cool. But at the same time, it didn't do what I wanted it to do. I wanted more sex. The book wasn't really about sex. It was just about the conversations that we have around sex. I wanted a little bit more from it. And I mean, it's a novella. It was good. It was done well enough. The author wrote this kind of as, I think she said, a fan fiction to her own story. So it's fine, honestly. Read it if you've read the series, but I wouldn't say it's super duper necessary. So those are my 3-star books. Now on to my 4-star reads. The first one is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This is the memoir of the woman who was sexually assaulted by Brock Turner in the big Stanford case that happened back in 2015. Last year she finally came out, revealed her identity to the world, and is sharing her story, centering her voice in the conversation, and is no longer defining herself as a victim but a survivor of the situation. And it's a really, really fantastic opportunity to listen to or read this story. I'm really glad that I listened to it because it was wonderful to hear Chanel Miller actually talking about her experiences. So if it is that you can listen to the audiobook, I definitely highly recommend that. It's wonderful. It's not just about what happened to her, but it's really about the aftermath and what she learned and what it taught her and how it shaped her life. And it's an incredible story. I really have no way of like evaluating it and talking about it in any detailed way. This is just something that you kind of have to pick up and experience on your own. It's fantastic. Highly recommended. Next up, I read Once Upon an Eid, edited by S.K. Ali and Aisha Said. This is a collection of short stories that comes out in May, so I got an ARC from the publisher. I requested an ARC in exchange for an honest review from Abrams Books, so thank you so much to them for sending this to me. You'll also be seeing a full review of this sometime soon on my channel. But I loved this book, y'all. This is an adorable collection of 15 stories about 15 Muslim kids on Eid, and it is absolutely precious. I love the diversity in the book. I love the way in which it shows that, you know, Eid is practiced and conceived of differently in so many different Muslim communities, amongst so many different Muslims of so many different backgrounds. So I love the diversity in it. I love the conversations about what Eid meant to each of the characters and how it fit into what all of the families were going through at that point in their life. Some of the stories were very light-hearted and adorable. Some of them were actually a little bit heavier and touched on harder topics like grief and oppression and all of those different things. But ultimately what bounded all of these stories together was joy in the collective love for Eid. Growing up as Muslims in the West, all that we are ever like exposed to is Christmas. So like, you know, Christmas movies, Christmas TV shows, Christmas specials of TV shows, but we don't ever see like anything to do with Eid or anything to do with Muslims. Like, you know, that's just something that people just don't want to go there. So it's finally nice to have a collection of books that's being published in the mainstream publishing industry in the United States that's being pushed for young kids to read and experience and enjoy. It's such a fantastic book. My favorite stories in here was Not Only and Only by Huda Al-Marashi, which was a really cool story about a Shia Muslim girl who makes friends with a Sunni Muslim girl, and she's afraid to tell her because of the ways in which Shia Muslims are often discriminated against. And I'm glad that this book had a story about a Shia Muslim girl, because Shia Muslims are often overly repressed and silenced in the Muslim community. So it was wonderful to see that representation in here. And my absolute favorite story was Eid and Pink Bubblegum, Inshallah, by Randa Abdel Fattah. Randa Abdel Fattah is one of my favorite authors, so obviously I really enjoyed this story. It was so gorgeous, and it was the only story in the book that made me cry. And this was not like one of the heavy stories. It was a very light-hearted story, but it still made me cry because it was so touching and beautifully written. And now on to the final book that I have to talk about. This is the one book that I gave 5 stars to, and it was so good. And the thing is, I wasn't even expecting this book to be so freaking monumental. So it's called Brother by David Chariandi. It's set in Toronto, and it's about these 2 Trini Canadian boys. It follows Michael and his older brother Francis, and it looks at Francis's impact on Michael's life, essentially. This is a book that really and truly I can't explain much of what's in it, because first of all, it's a very short book. It's just about 180 pages long, and a lot of it is stuff that you just kind of have to experience when you go into it. This is a story about brotherhood. It's a story about masculinity. It's a story about being the child of immigrants, and it's a story about police brutality in Canada and the ways in which that affects and traumatizes Black and brown communities in Canada, particularly in Toronto. I love the writing in here. I love the way the author deals with all of the characters and their situations. It's just fantastic. The themes are handled wonderfully. My favorite part of the book was when the characters came back to Trinidad. So when they were really young, they came to Trinidad, and they had like a little flashback moment in the book where we had a few pages kind of exploring their first and only trip to Trinidad when they were kids. And it was such a really strange experience for me to read that, because being from Trinidad is everything I know. It's my country, it's where I live, right? So, you know, but to like actually you know, put myself in the shoes of somebody who is from the diaspora. Oftentimes people from the diaspora write about Trinidad in this, well, not just Trinidad, but the Caribbean as a whole. They write about the Caribbean with this sense of disconnect and nostalgia and longing and memory and sort of like missing the homeland or feeling disconnected because maybe your parents are from there but you've never been there before and it's like this new place. And so to see that disconnect and that comfort expressed in the story almost made me uncomfortable in a way, because it's like I was seeing Trinidad in a different light. I was seeing Trinidad as this place of the past, as this place to feel nostalgic about, or this place to feel that you feel disconnected with. And I enjoyed that in a good, in a bad, no, I don't know what I mean. It was an enjoyable experience to read that. It was really interesting. And I just loved the book. It was fantastic. So yeah, I think I'm going to end the video. I don't know if this car video was a good idea, y'all. I'm not accustomed doing this, so let me know in the comments if you just prefer me to be in my room or if you don't mind me mixing it up and filming videos in my car. If you have any thoughts on any of the books that I mentioned in this video, please let me know in the comments down below. All of that being said, I hope you have a lovely, lovely day, and until next time, inshallah, keep reading.